I want to say I'm very proud to be on stage with two very skilled young women from the Arctic. It's two young women from Nunavut and from Greenland, and I'm from Greenland as well, so we're three Inuit women. I'm very proud of that. And we're going to continue the talk about the melting ice and climate change and the effect that it has on the Arctic, and especially going to talk about indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. And I want to leave the words, especially for you. I'm not going to say too much today. I'm going to be on the next session as well, so I think I had my time. But I just want to say in the beginning, we see that there's more and more research going on in the Arctic. And we see there's a lot of scientific research in the Arctic, and we talk about science diplomacy. And in recent years, we have also heard about indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. And I think most people that I talk to, they usually say it's a good thing, we would like to do that. But we don't necessarily know how to do it, and we don't necessarily know what is it, actually. And I think this is some of the topic that we're going to discuss today. So hopefully you will enlighten all of us on how can we do it better in the future. I want to pass the floor on to Mia, first of all. Mia is, her name is Mia Otokiak from Nunavut. She's a former youth science ambassador, and she's also a technical advisor for Nunavut Impact Review Board in Canada. So welcome to the big stage. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming. This is my first time to Tokyo, and I'm absolutely loving it already. And like Aaja mentioned, we're talking about climate change in the Arctic. And being born and raised in the Canadian Arctic, I have witnessed climate change with my own eyes in these last 10 years, and more so and in a rapid way in these last 5 to 7 years. So climate change is having a huge effect on traditional Inuit knowledge. Traditional Inuit knowledge has been respected and followed for thousands of years. And everything from migration patterns of wildlife to how to survive in the harsh Arctic environment, to how to travel on the land, and just so much more traditional knowledge that has been orally passed down for thousands of years from generation to generation. And this knowledge is just so valuable to us, our people and our elders, and to see that climate change is affecting that traditional knowledge is very, very heartbreaking. And so, like I mentioned, it's traditional knowledge in our culture has been passed down orally, and it's only been within the last, I'd say, 8 to 10 years that we have written down 8 IQ, Inuit Qivioq values, and these values are a way of life for us. These are what we have followed and have been a part of our tradition for thousands of years. And because of climate change, it has been making this knowledge a lot less reliable. The positive note is our youth, the youth of all of the Arctic, Greenland, Canada, Alaska, are coming together. They're understanding and seeing climate change from a younger age. And so they're dedicated to working together for a better future for everybody in the Arctic. Like I said earlier, I've seen climate change with my own eyes, and I'm only 26 years old. And especially more rapidly in these last 5 to 7 years. The hottest it's ever been in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, where I'm from, was about 25 degrees, and that was just for a couple hours. And about 5 years ago, we had 27-degree weather for 3 days straight. which had never, ever been seen before, and just caused so much damage to the environment, to our way of life for that time in the summer. And so since then, the weather has been very unpredictable. I know a lot of people think of climate change and they say, oh, it's been very hot, or oh, very cold, but it's actually, it's been fluctuated in the Canadian Arctic so much that it's very unpredictable now. You know, the elders used to be able to tell us, you know, on this specific day, the ice is gonna freeze up, so you're able to walk on it. On this day, the ice is gonna melt, and it's dangerous to walk on. And now, because of climate change and the unpredictability, the elders can't share that knowledge anymore, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, not just to myself, but to the elders themselves, the knowledge that they've been passed down from their parents and their parents before them. So, like I said, it's heartbreaking, but on the bright side, I'm excited for the future because the youth are our future, and they know, and they're understanding and seeing this a lot more than I think past generations have. And they've been getting a lot more involved and dedicated to working together, and especially with people like you. So I'm very, very grateful to be here and to be spreading my knowledge and to share with you all that Indigenous youth would love to reach out and to work with people like you for a better future in the Arctic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. And I just have one question for you before I leave the floor to Qivioq, because I heard you in another session and you were doing a great presentation, so thank you for that. And you were saying that we're used to climate change in the Arctic. This is not new for us. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's to a different extent this time. And you were saying that we're used to adapting. Could you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, no. In my presentation earlier, I was just talking about climate change has been around for thousands of years, you know, from the ice ages to warming periods. But, you know, climate change now has been man-made. And so because we've, us as Inuit, we adapt. We have adapted to harsh weathers, we've adapted to climate change, and so it may be something that's very scary right now, but we always adapt and we always move forward and are able to live in these harsh environments.
Thank you. And then I will pass the floor on to Qivioq Løvstrøm, which I know from back home in Greenland. I've known her for a couple of years, so it's great to share the stage with you. And Qivioq is an assistant professor at the University of Greenland, focusing on culture and social history, but she is also the chair of the Human Rights Council in Greenland. So I want to pass the floor on to you. Qivioq, the floor is yours.
Is it on?
Yes.
Hey, hajimemashite konnichiwa. Hey. Nivideyondo kudasai. Yeah, nice to meet you all. And if my first name is a little bit too difficult, you can please call me Nivi as well, my middle name. When it comes to Greenland melting, it's something that I have always been aware of. Even sometime when I was a teenager, there was a Danish politician saying a famous quote about the ice is melting at the poles. And we all made fun of it, but we still knew it was true. The thing is, my parents' generations were activists. They fought for people to know what was going on. And I just found it quite interesting that the panel before us said that policymakers would listen to reality. But the thing is, it's one thing to listen, another thing to act on it. And we haven't really seen many actions so far. So I'm very glad that actions like the Arctic Circle and participation is taking place. But I also repeat myself quite often when I come to these things. So I will try to say something else, say something more interesting. When people talk about Indigenous knowledge, sometimes they get a little bit confused, so they Google it. So the first things you'll find when you Google Indigenous knowledge will be something that doesn't actually represent many Indigenous people's type of knowledge. because we are not one entity. That would be like writing Asian types of knowledge. So many different ways of thinking. And so, for me personally, I can only talk about the way that we think in Kalaallit Nunaat, my country, Greenland. And a really good example of using indigenous knowledge would be how we would, when we were traveling with a kayak internationally, we would use an oar to tap on ice to listen to it. And then the sonic part of it, the sound that traveled back, would tell us whether or not it was too dangerous to travel in that direction. So we already knew all of that. I am pretty sure that now people could use calculations to get the precise type of sonical representation of the depths and the dangers of that type of ice. But we didn't need that. We could just hear it. And the combination of that knowledge with how we do maritime work now would be very interesting as well. Just one tap and we would know maybe we shouldn't go in this direction. So there is that as well. Another thing that I would really like to go into is that part of the Human Rights Council of Greenland, ICC Greenland is represented in that. And the ICC is the Inuit Circumpolar Council, and they span the whole circumpolar north and represent the Inuit in that way. And they came out last year with the Inuit Ethical, Equitable Engagement Report, where we really, really want scientists and researchers to read it before coming to our lands so that they can understand us better before we have to try to understand them, perhaps. Because it can be quite, to put it simply, annoying to get the same question again and again. And also to really see research fatigue in action. You can do that in Greenland and probably the rest of the North as well. So one of the things, very concrete things I would suggest that I have heard before is that we have a shared database of knowledge about the Arctic so that people do not have to be making the same type of research, so we all share the data so we don't have to repeat again and again to get to status quo, so to speak. Because then we can reach the future of proper science that helps globally. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Qivioq. And before passing the floor on to everybody here who wants to give a question to one of these very skilled women, you can do that. I just want to ask one quick question for Qivioq. Because of the climate change, we see so much research, especially when it comes to natural science. And do you see a need, for example, for more social science, more research with social science in Greenland? And can you maybe elaborate a little bit on research fatigue? Because I know in small communities, for example, in North Greenland, it can be very interesting to figure out what's going on there. And why do you see these signs of research fatigue there, for example?
I'm going to start with the last question and work backwards. The Inuit are some of the most researched people in the world. And it starts out with being researched on as a subject. And now people are trying to change that and researching with us, having us as co-writers to their research. Unfortunately, the intent is there, but the execution is still lacking. And that makes people feel like they're merely an object and feel dehumanized. So that is part of it. But another thing is there's so many researchers. Thousands of researchers come to Greenland every single year. And when you get the same, not necessarily questions, but the same topic, because it's almost always climate change or adaptability, or maybe about the high suicide rate. So it's those topics again and again that you keep hearing, and it is quite traumatizing to some people to get that all the time, because then it feels like, is that all I am? And then...
I think it answers both questions. Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any questions? There's one all the way in the back. Please be patient with us. Oh, there's one over here. We'll take this one first.
Hello, my name is Varvara, and I am a representative of Indigenous communities of Russia. Also, I am a postgraduate student, and I have a question for you. Do you considering the communication with Indigenous communities from Russia? Is it possible in this difficult political situation? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I know for a fact that the ICC had a General Assembly last summer, and they will hold it again this summer physically. Last time, the Russian participants could participate online, but they read from a piece of paper. So we are not sure if they were speaking their own words or if they were repeating something. So the ICC are reaching out, and they never want to lose sight of their family in Russia, but unfortunately, there's only so much you can do.
And what about research collaboration, for example, with people from Russia?
Right now, I can actually say we have a policy going on because we're part of Denmark, that we are not allowed to do any research with any Russian.
Mia, do you have any comments? No, that's fine. We'll take the next question.
My name is Oliver Qivioq, and I live on the northern coast of Alaska. I'm Otokiak, and my question is, do you, your people at home, still use traditional ice cellars, that are dug into the permafrost? Because where I live at home, we rely heavily on permafrost to store our meat, mainly bowhead whales that we live off. And are you guys seeing the permafrost, not being able to hold cold enough temps, to hold frozen meat throughout the year? Is my first question. And the second one is, with less sea ice cover, a big problem we're seeing on the northern coast of Alaska is erosion. And the erosion that is happening, washing my home away. And I was wondering if you guys are seeing that, and maybe, because we have had to import huge boulders, and place them on our beach in order to fight erosion. And I just want to know, some of the things that you all might be doing.
Qivioq Illislu. Thank you very much for the questions.
Thank you very much. In Cambridge Bay, and it's funny, on the topic of climate change, we, before 7 years ago, had never seen whales in our community. And like our community name says, we're in a bay. And so, like I said, before 7 years ago, we had never seen whales. So we did not do any of the permafrost to hold any whales, but actually within the last 5 to 7 years, we have started getting beluga and narwhals because of the warming of the waters. So we haven't done any of the permafrost. We don't use the permafrost like you guys do, but that's an amazing, innovative idea. What we have used up in Cambridge Bay, we have a lot of tundra around us. We use caches. And I know for a fact, permafrost melting is having a huge effect on that in our areas where we do, in the past, all our historical areas where we have caches, there are a couple of them that have sumped in because of the melting of the permafrost. And again, we're not right on the actual ocean, so we haven't seen erosion, but I do know a lot of the Nunavut communities that are right on oceans are having the same issues further out of the communities, and it's just getting closer and closer within, and it is a very scary and real problem from climate change. Thank you.
Yeah, we have to use electronic freezers. In Greenland, we do not use the same kind of technology as you. We also have caches. Yeah, I can also say that that the weather has changed extremely in Greenland as well. I was delayed by 2 days because of very, very bad weather. And suddenly I hear that it's 10 degrees in Greenland right now, which it should not be. So there is extreme weather changes. And another thing is we experience that we're actually rising rather than, there's erosion going on, but because of the huge chunk of ice is melting, it's kind of not as heavy anymore, so the land is rising.
And maybe I can just add, in Greenland we have, for example, the thawing of the permafrost is affecting the landing strip. For example, in Qivioq, Løvstrøm, where some of you might have been. If you're going to Greenland, that's the place you're going first. So, you know, it's a combination of good and bad, I would say. And, you know, when we look, for example, at fish stocks, we see that there's new species coming to Greenland, and sometimes other species are disappearing from Greenland. So it really is, you know, an unpredictable climate in many, many ways. And as Mia was saying, it's usually, people have the perception that it's just getting warmer and that it should be good for us. And you know, for some, maybe that's a good thing. But it's also very important to say that it's just getting more extreme and more unpredictable. So I just wanted to emphasize that as well. Do we have more questions? Yes, in the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Chamberlain. I'm here on behalf of Chalista Corporation. We're an Alaska Native corporation that represents 56 tribes and 37,000 indigenous people in Western Alaska. Over in the 45 years I've been alive, our traditional way of life has pretty much been destroyed. In my personal experience, we grew up living off the land in my tribal area of Aniak, Alaska. When I was in my teens, our fishing area pretty much collapsed. And so along with climate change, and that's happened within our region, 2 of our 56 tribes, their villages have been sunk into the ocean and are now being forced to move. We're here, I've been dealing with the salmon crash on the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, where Alaska's not even able to make its escapement into Canada. And all the science supports, you know, those problems aren't arising within our region. The rivers are doing great, but overfishing in the ocean, competition for the Pacific biomass within the hatcheries has destroyed the fishing within the rivers. And our communities aren't able to survive in the traditional way they are. And so over the last few decades, our question has changed. You know, we're still fighting to restore and preserve our traditional ways of life. But our question has also changed to how do we stop this, to a new question. What do we do if they fail? Because in our region, you know, we're within decades of seeing salmon on the Yukon and Kuskokwim go extinct due to conditions in the ocean and inaction by policymakers. I think one of the big things we've seen is our concerns have been consistently ignored for decades, and our traditional ways of life are being destroyed. And so how do we adapt for that? And I was wondering if you face those same questions and how you address them when they're brought up to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Very important one. And I completely agree, because I'm in the same boat. You know, I'm only 26 years old, and I've been asking those questions, and now my view has also changed. Because that's the biggest question: how do we stop climate change? How do we work together? And you know, before my answer was always, we can work. But I think now it's irreversible, which is scary. But I think the way we can move forward is educating, and this is exactly what I love to do, is spread my knowledge and share with people like you. And exactly like what we've been discussing is that climate change isn't just a one-way, you know, it's not just only getting hotter or only getting extremely cold. It's very unpredictable. There are so many things from, you know, acidification, ocean acidification, to ocean levels rising, migration patterns, so many aspects of climate change that are affecting Indigenous peoples and our knowledge, that I think just education, the more chances any Indigenous person can get, and this is exactly what I love to do, is come to these conferences, go to meetings, and just spread my knowledge and show people that I am living proof that I've lived through climate change. And exactly like you said, it's hard to beat the battle when we're already so far behind, but just education, I think, is the biggest key in spreading that and sharing to politicians and governments that this is really happening, and in the last 10 years has just been unbelievably harsh onto our environment. So I think the biggest thing is education.
I agreed, as a reason why I'm a cultural and social history assistant professor. But I also want to add that we have to then trust that we are not the only ones who are adaptable. The animals who have been with us and who we have been with for generations are also adaptable. And we have to remember that and trust in them somehow as well. But yes, we have to have more, we have to write all of this down, and not being like all the anthropologists before us and do it because we believe that we are doomed, but so that that we can see how it was before and see a pattern, and one day maybe they will return to the same pattern, but otherwise they will adapt.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to quickly add, and I could talk about this for days, but working with Indigenous communities, such a huge aspect, and not just working with, but understanding. And something that I always love to say is, if you're a scientist or a researcher coming up to work in the communities, you have to come with an open mind. You can't just come in and say, oh, I'm going to teach you about this, or oh, I want your knowledge to give me on climate change. It's not going to work that way. You have to come in with an open mindset. You have to come in human first, and you have to understand the community and what their needs are. I know a lot of scientists and researchers come in and say, I'm going to teach you, or I'm going to give you a presentation on this, but you have to come in and understand that we were here first. We have the knowledge, and you're a visitor to us. And when you come in, have an open mindset and actually want to work with the community on what they see as issues.
I wanted to ask one question, because we see more and more researchers with an Inuit background, and I think this is quite interesting as well. And Qivioq, you were saying that it's very interesting and important for us to write down the different knowledges that we have as well. So how do you see, for example, ourselves writing down Indigenous knowledge? And, you know, we've been talking so much about climate change, and I think, you know, just understanding maybe this was knowledge that was very important a couple of years ago, but then we can see how it has changed. Do you think that is important?
It is very healing, actually, that it is us who are part of the problem, so we can become part of the solution as well. Because, as many of you know, academia is often seen as just an extension of colonialism, and being a part of it and being able to change it is quite a gift, and I do not take it for granted. Another thing is that I see my students when I teach them and see the way that they change how they view themselves, because we grow up with books in Danish that tells us that of being indigenous is something of the past and maybe something to be ashamed of and not something you are as a modern person. And so many people will talk about their knowledge not as traditional knowledge but as local knowledge because they don't want to feel ashamed of that idea of being indigenous. They just want to say that they're modern Greenlandic. And now changing that viewpoint is amazing. Seeing people not being ashamed of who they are is a gift.
Thank you so much to Mia, Otokiak, and to Qivioq Løvstrøm. Please give them a hand.